The mornings in our house were filled with a unique kind of quiet one that didn't soothe but rather settled heavily on your heart, as if the air itself held unspoken promises. In the past, I regarded it as tranquility. Recently, it seemed more akin to a tranquil slumber. As I lingered by the kitchen counter, I found myself drying a glass that, with its fine layer of dust, whispered tales of neglect and time passing untouched for weeks. The marble beneath my fingertips felt like a whisper of winter, smooth and gleaming, with an elegance that spoke of time and artistry. Much like the rest of this place, immaculate, unspoiled, carefully curated yet oddly devoid of spirit, a dwelling designed more for appreciation than for everyday life. My husband preferred it this way. All things find their rightful spot, each person embracing their part. Once the sun rises, the first meal of the day awaits at 8, while as the day winds down, the evening feast is set for 7. As he prepared to leave for the day, she leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss on his cheek, a sweet farewell that lingered in the air. The familiar touch on the forehead upon his return, warm-hearted, customary. Proceed with caution. Always planned, always satisfied. As I shared my thoughts, he gazed intently, yet his responses felt scripted and practiced. Nothing too severe, nothing unkind at all, simply rehearsed. Indeed, I made an effort to remain unaffected. For years, I believed that stability represented the purest expression of love, embodying dignity and reliability. And maybe there is. Yet within it, there lies a subtle ending. As I adjusted the neckline of my blouse, the gentle caress of silk danced against my skin, weaving a tale of elegance and comfort. Each day I embraced a little luxury, a secret pleasure that remained unseen by others. Not from a place of vanity, but from a deeper, more complex motivation. It's essential to recognize that under the layers of wife, hostess, and caretaker, there existed a woman yearning for acknowledgement. The kettle clicked off, releasing steam that danced upward like a gentle whisper of a tale waiting to be told. As I filled my cup with water, I observed the tea bag dance and descend, releasing its vibrant hue into the pristine liquid, a well-known rehearsed gesture. Yet that morning the stillness was shattered. The front door swung open with a gentle creak, accompanied by the sound of a jacket being freed from the weight of the rain. I anticipated the moment when I heard the voice, rich and inviting a resonance that had long been absent from these corridors. Greetings, is there anyone present? I halted, the cup suspended in the air, just shy of my lips. It had been nearly 3 years since our paths last crossed his son. From his first marriage, a figure often shrouded in distance, yet maintaining a veneer of politeness, seemed perpetually elsewhere, carving out his own narrative. The most recent update I received was that he had relocated to the other side of the country in pursuit of new opportunities and thrilling experiences. My husband frequently shared tales of him, each time filled with admiration. Their warm welcome reached my ears long before their faces came into view. A cozy embrace, the sound of cherished laughter echoing through the corridor. The warmth of a father and his grown son sharing easy affection filled the air, while I lingered in the kitchen, feeling like an observer in my own space. As I finally pivoted toward the doorway, towel still clutched in my hand, he was already waiting there. With a presence that commands attention, he stands tall, his shoulders broad and squared, exuding a calm assurance born from experiences that have molded him into a figure of substance. His jaw was now adorned with stubble darker than I recalled, and his eyes carried a softness that took me by surprise. Embrace the art of watching and understanding. It was a pleasure to encounter you once more, he remarked, taking a step closer. With a gentle smile, I carefully draped the towel over the back of the chair, each fold telling its own tale of care and attention. And you as well. He approached me confidently and wrapped his arms around me in a warm embrace. Comforting, steady, and more extended than I anticipated. I felt a subtle tension, uncertain of where to position my hands, and then gently laid them on his back. As he drew back, the warmth of his smile lingered. You haven't changed at all, he added. Yet, the glimmer in his eyes told a different tale. I let out a chuckle, shaking my head in disbelief. Oh, I'm not so sure about that. The dialogue meandered back to my husband, his aspirations for the day, his excitement about having his son return home. I absorbed every word, responding with thoughtful nods and engaging with courteous inquiries. Yet I found myself captivated by the gaze of the younger man directed towards me. The way his gaze lingered, not drifting away as most men's did, but instead it found a home captured. It felt as if he truly understood me. It lacked audacity. It was perfectly acceptable, yet it existed. A depth hidden within the essence of the phrases. In the living room, they gathered their voices, weaving a tapestry of sound rising and falling like the gentle ebb and flow of waves caressing the shore while I busied myself in the kitchen. Every now and then I would catch snippets of their dialogue. Let's weave some tales about our work adventures and perhaps share a meal together. I immersed myself in the rhythm of the dishes, the gentle splash of water and the soft chime of glass meeting porcelain. As I cast my gaze back to the doorway, I discovered him observing me from the other side of the room. Not gazing, not staring in awe, observing. And I sensed my heartbeat quicken before I could urge it to calm down. That evening, once my husband had retired early, as was his custom after a tiring day, I found myself lingering by the window in the upstairs hallway. In the gentle illumination of the garden lights, a young man lingered in solitude, a cigarette in hand. One hand rested in his pocket, while the other brought the glowing ember to his lips, creating a moment steeped in quiet reflection. His gaze lifted toward the sky, and for a fleeting instant I wondered if he had caught a glimpse of my presence. I retreated into the dimness of the wall, my heart racing more fiercely than it ought to have. I reassured myself that it was insignificant. I was naive, lost in my own thoughts. It was merely the clumsy embrace of coming together again, the courteous glow of familial connections. Yet deep down, beneath the facade of tranquility, a change had taken place, and I experienced it deeply, softly unfolding gently, persistent, unmistakable. That night was restless as I found myself caught in a loop, reliving each glance and every smile repeatedly, questioning if his gaze truly met mine in the way I believed, or if it was merely a reflection of my own desires. The following morning, I found myself awake before the sun had fully risen. Slumber had eluded me, my thoughts swirling with tales I wished to forget. The atmosphere in this house was oddly still, considering the crowd gathered within its walls. I glided through the rooms in gentle slippers, mindful not to disrupt the delicate tranquility that lingered in the atmosphere. In the kitchen, the window above the sink welcomed the gentle embrace of soft grey light on a cloudy morning. I filled my cup with steaming coffee. Darkness without sweetness. I followed the same approach I always used to keep my mind keen. As I stood there, the quiet of the house enveloped me, a sacred space where I was the sole occupant while my husband remained peacefully asleep upstairs. That was my belief, at least. The eerie creak of the back door swinging open sent a shiver down my spine. As I glanced over, he entered the morning mist, clinging to him, hair a delightful mess, a jacket draped nonchalantly over one shoulder. His smile lit up the moment he saw me, warm and inviting, as if he had always been a part of this place. As the dawn broke, he greeted the day, his voice carrying the remnants of slumber. I nodded, feeling a mix of uncertainty and hesitation about how to respond without coming across as awkward. He shrugged and moved toward the coffee machine, acknowledging the early hour without a word. At ease, as if he had been navigating this kitchen for a lifetime. Traveling through time zones can leave you feeling disoriented and exhausted, perhaps. I decided to go for a stroll. He filled his cup, leaning casually against the counter, a scene unfolding between us. He allowed the silence to linger, and in that stillness, the tension grew even more palpable. The silence hung heavily in the air, a palpable tension that wrapped around us, making my skin feel constricted and uneasy. Are you always this composed right at the start of the day? His gaze traveled over my figure, pausing just a moment too long on the delicate fabric of my sweater that hugged my form a bit more than I had planned. The warmth surged within me, yet I maintained a calm facade. "It's just a habit," I said, wrapping my arms around my waist. He smiled once more, yet this time it carried a gentler warmth. It seems that certain habits have a tale of their own, deserving to be cherished. After that silence enveloped us, he emerged into the garden, coffee cradled in his hand, while I remained rooted in place, the unsettling rhythm of my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. The remainder of the morning unfolded in a familiar rhythm. My husband took a seat at the table, full of cheer, blissfully unaware. He shared tales of work, of meetings and clients, weaving narratives that filled the air, but never truly connected us in any meaningful way. I acknowledged everything with a nod, posed the usual inquiries, and offered smiles at just the right moments. Yet my thoughts continued to drift hesitant to meet the gaze of the younger man. As the afternoon sun cast its warm glow, my husband proposed that we tackle the task of clearing out the shed in the back garden, a lingering project that had been set aside since last summer. I extended my assistance, as declining would have felt out of place. As we delved into the boxes and tools, time slipped away and the scent of freshly cut grass and rich earth enveloped us, weaving a tapestry of memories in the air. As my husband struggled with a pile of weathered planks, I suddenly sensed a gentle touch at my waist. Illumination. Subtle, yet intentional, I hesitated to turn my head, fearing that my expression might reveal more than I was ready to share. I immersed myself in the task at hand, choosing to overlook everything else around me. As my husband stepped inside to take a call, I lingered outside, kneeling by the garden wall, to organize the tools lost in the moment. At that moment, I sensed the presence of footsteps trailing behind me, deliberate and unhurried. His presence enveloped me, a silent prelude to his words. "You should let me do that," he said, his voice a soft whisper, as if sharing a secret meant only for her ears. I glanced back, prepared to assert that I was okay, but he was already kneeling next to me, his fingers grazing mine as he reached for the same hammer. I paused for a brief moment, just the right length. Neither of us took a step back. His fingers lingered on mine, steady yet gentle. He held on tightly and I remained right there. "You're trembling," he murmured. Gently, his gaze unwavering upon me. I opened my mouth, poised to refute it, but the words lingered, trapped between my throat and my pride. In that instant, I found myself locked in his gaze, enveloped by the intensity of the moment, fully conscious of the peril that lingered in the air as he leaned in the warmth of his breath, brushed against my cheek, creating an intimate moment that felt like it belonged in a tale of old. He gently touched my face in a respectful, the curve just beneath my jaw. He observed me intently, holding back, offering me a moment to put an end to this. I did not. I ought to have. However, I chose not to. Our lips briefly met in a moment of emotional. Mine was gentle, measured, as if he were carefully gauging the terrain before making a move. Yet as I remained still, my hands gripping the hammer's handle with a futile clench, the kiss grew more intense. It unfolded gradually. It was calm and collected. It was intentional. Guided, a kiss that boldly claims its place, confident in the response it anticipates. My body reacted instinctively even before my thoughts could align. The gentle parting of my lips, the subtle inclination of my head to connect with him in that moment, every fiber of my being urged me to let him continue. There wasn't a single part of me that held back. When the kiss finally ended, he remained right where he was. His forehead pressed gently against mine, and for a fleeting moment, silence enveloped us. "I shouldn't have done that," I murmured, yet my tone revealed a lack of true belief. His gaze remained unwavering. "You let me continue." I rose abruptly, clearing the dust from my knees, steering clear of his eyes. My hands shook as I collected the final tools, pushing myself to move, attempting to calm the storm within me. With each step I took, I sensed his gaze lingering on me, tracking my every movement. As I entered the house once more, I found my husband still engaged in a phone call, pacing the hallway with an intensity that suggested he was deeply immersed in a business discussion. He remained oblivious to the warmth rising in my cheeks or the tremor in my breath. I occupied my time at the sink, scrubbing my hands with an intensity that felt excessive, attempting to wipe away the lingering sensation of his lips. His hand brushed against my skin, yet certain things linger far beyond the surface. That night, I found myself wide awake long after my husband's gentle snoring had enveloped the room, gazing at the ceiling, savoring the memory of that kiss like a hidden treasure I couldn't reveal. And deep within the recesses of my thoughts, hidden beneath layers of guilt and shame, there was a singular truth I held on to. This was just the beginning of many more tales to unfold. The days that came after wove themselves seamlessly into the familiar rhythms of our existence. Timetables, meals, shared courteous conversations over a warm cup. At first glance, everything seemed the same. The routine remained steadfast, much like a decorative layer concealing imperfections beneath. Yet the fissure remained expanding with every gaze that lingered a moment too long. Each pause that extended just beyond the realm of ease. I promised myself I wouldn't find myself in his company once more. I convinced myself that the kiss was just a fleeting error, a brief misstep. Nothing beyond that. I repeated this to myself so often that it started to feel like a sacred ritual. Yet, I've come to understand that prayers become mere words when your body is already narrating a different tale. He faced me directly. In contrast, he stayed engaged, completely relaxed, seamlessly integrating into the little moments of the day as if nothing had occurred. Perhaps that should have made it simpler for me to follow suit. To withdraw into the comforting cadence of avoidance, yet it remained unchanged. There I was drawn in by his presence more than I intended, captivated by the way his smile lit up when he shared a laugh with his father and the effortless grace with which he navigated the familiar surroundings, as if he belonged there completely. There was a moment when his gaze met mine, a fleeting glance that seemed to hold a world of unspoken tales, as if he believed the shadows around us were the only witnesses to his thoughts. The intensity of that gaze held a power that left me momentarily breathless, igniting a rapid heartbeat beneath the surface of my skin. On a day that seemed just like any other, my husband shared his exciting plans for the evening ahead. An evening spent with the colleagues, one of those obligatory gatherings that I had long since chosen to forego. With a warm smile and a nod, I offered him my best wishes for a pleasant evening. He pressed his lips to my cheek, gentle and far away, just as he always had, a motion that felt more like routine than desire. Once he departed, the home seemed overwhelmingly spacious. Enveloped in an unsettling silence, I occupied my time with little tasks, folding clothes and dusting surfaces that sparkled with cleanliness. Anything to keep my hands busy, to steer my thoughts away from wandering where they wished to roam. He appeared quietly, as if he had stepped out of a tale, leaving no trace of his arrival. As I pivoted away from the sink, there he stood propped against the doorway, observing me with that familiar, inscrutable gaze. "Spending the evening by yourself, are you?" His voice carried a relaxed tone, yet it hinted at deeper layers beneath the surface. Something intentional, I nodded. Drawing my focus back to the dish towel I held tightly in my hands. "Your father is attending a dinner for work." He entered the kitchen, each movement deliberate and thoughtful. "Typically, you don't accompany him." I focused intently on the towel. No. The quiet lingered, expanding, enveloping us in its weight. His gaze was palpable, a silent weight that hung in the air, charged with an unspoken energy that filled the void left by our inability to communicate. He finally spoke, his voice gentler, this time. "I've been attempting to convince myself that the events of the other day were insignificant." My hands halted, caught in a moment of stillness. However, I'm unable to do that. With a measured pace, I pivoted, locking eyes with him in a moment that felt charged with unspoken narratives. It's best to avoid making statements like that. Yet it is indeed a fact. His gaze remained firm, resolute. It seems I'm not alone in this sentiment. I chose to remain silent. I was unable to do that. The words were trapped, suffocating in the tight grip of my throat as he drew nearer. I felt an unexpected stillness wash over me, incapable. "Reluctant to journey, you had the power to intervene." He spoke softly. Yet that didn't happen. The raw truth of it struck me more profoundly than I had anticipated. I felt the urge to refute it, to engage in a debate. Yet I found myself suspended in a void with nothing solid to anchor me, and we were both aware of it. I attempted to create some distance, retreating toward the counter, yet he pursued unhurried. Unyielding, his hand extended into the unknown, soft and soothing, fingers gliding along the edge of my wrist where the rhythm of my heartbeat revealed my secrets. "Your presence has been on my mind lately." He whispered, his voice a soft sigh in the air. Since that day, it has been a journey. I shut my eyes, attempting to evoke feelings of rage and resentment. Anything that would ground me in logic. Yet all that enveloped me was a wave of warmth. "It's not possible," I murmured, my voice trembling. "This is not a possibility," yet my hands remained still, not pushing him away. Instead, they discovered the edge of the counter behind me, holding on tightly as if that would anchor me in place. He stepped closer, his presence enveloping me with warmth, the air thick with an unspoken energy that crackled between us. Suddenly, the familiar jingle of keys echoed through the air. signaling an arrival at the front door. The sudden shock of reality cut through the atmosphere with a crack, leaving an indelible mark on the moment. I recoiled in a rush, almost losing my balance, my heart pounding fiercely within my chest. He remained still, observing me with unwavering eyes, his lips forming a tight line as if suppressing the thoughts he longed to express. My husband's voice echoed from the hallway, bright and unaware. I left my phone behind. I faced the sink, my fingers clutching the edge tightly, turning my knuckles pale as I worked to calm my breath. When my husband entered the kitchen, beaming and inquiring about his phone, I had regained my composure, my expression serene, and my tone steady. I gestured toward the side table where the phone lay exactly as he had placed it. With a grin, he exclaimed, "I've found it," as he lifted it triumphantly. "I'll be returning home later than usual." A familiar peck on the cheek, a ritual we know all too well. As the door clicked shut, a hush enveloped the house, wrapping it in a blanket of stillness once again. Yet the stillness that lingered between us now held a new weight. It throbbed with all the unspoken tales between us, all that we understood lingered just out of sight, ready to be unveiled. Later that night, I found myself at the window, once more gazing into the garden, where the soft illumination of the porch light pierced the shadows. I had a feeling he would be there casually, leaning against the railing, a cigarette glowing softly at his fingertips. Instead, I discovered the image of myself staring back from the glass, a woman who had lost sight of the contours of her own yearnings. Deep down, amidst the shadows of guilt and fear, I sensed that this was merely the beginning of a much larger tale. The journey had just commenced. It's fascinating how swiftly the body can turn against the thoughts we hold dear. It's fascinating how, despite your best efforts to resist your gaze, inevitably seeks out that person. It's as though your skin holds on to memories that your mind strives to leave behind. The days that followed dragged on, each one weighing down like a thick fog settling in. Breakfast chatter faded into a distant hum. My husband's words floated away from me, reminiscent of the hum of far-off vehicles. I acknowledged with a nod, offered a smile, and responded as anticipated. Yet within my mind spiraled like a relentless storm, revisiting time and again. The instant I could have brought to a close, I began to steer clear of the garden completely. I confined myself to the small office upstairs, pretending to sort through old paperwork. I left the door slightly ajar, allowing me to imagine the echoes of footsteps drifting through the hallways below. I convinced myself that by maintaining a distance, the burden of it would gradually fade away. The memory of his hand brushing against my wrist would slip away from me. As his lips lingered just above mine, I could almost savor the breath that danced in the space between us. Yet he chose not to engage. He exhibited remarkable patience. Steadfast in subtle, gentle manners, always measured, always hesitant to impose my will. Yet he was present in the nooks of my days, in the corners my husband never saw. A gentle essence, a presence that remained long after he had departed. It was my husband who opened the door to the next chapter for him. Unbeknownst to them, on a quiet Sunday morning as he savoured the final sip of his coffee, the shed came up in conversation once more. What remained to be accomplished? As the week unfolded, the skies hinted at a favourable turn, suggesting it might just be the ideal moment to wrap up the clearing process. I might have engaged in a debate. It might have been better to leave things as they were. That we might bring someone on board. However, I chose not to. I'm here to lend a hand. Before I had the chance to say anything, his son stepped in with an offer. The words lingered in the atmosphere, reminiscent of a stone gently sinking into the depths of a tranquil lake. My throat constricted. My husband beamed, unaware of the unfolding tale around him. That sounds wonderful. I'll be tied up in meetings for most of the week, but if you two could take care of it, that would really lighten my load. His suggestion came from a place of genuine intent, free from any ill will. There is no doubt, just the calm of someone who placed too much faith. The following afternoon, as my husband immersed himself in conference calls upstairs, I stood once more at the back of the garden, hands buried deep in the pockets of my jacket, observing the younger man as he pulled open the creaking door of the shed. As the sunlight poured down, a cloud of dust danced around him, swirling in the air like a whisper of smoke. I convinced myself that my role was merely to oversee the situation, always ready to lend a hand. The initial hour drifted by in a hush, a quiet prelude to what was to come. As we toiled together, we uncovered tales hidden within old boxes, arranging forgotten tools into tidy stacks, each item whispering its own history. From time to time, our fingers would lightly touch, almost as if the universe conspired to weave our paths together in those fleeting moments. Yet I experienced every single one as a flicker upon my skin. I made an effort to concentrate on the task at hand, in the cadence of raising, organizing, and piling up. Yet the gravity of his presence lingered undeniable and palpable just inches away from me. The scent of his sun-kissed skin lingered in the air, the fleeting look that ignited a fire more intense than the midday sun. It was at the moment we arrived at the back wall of the shed that the facade finally shattered. In that cramped little nook between the shelves and the wall, we found ourselves drawn together, our hands instinctively reaching for the same box in unison. Our hands met, lingering in a moment where neither of us chose to pull back. I focused intently on the box, tracing the outline of his fingers and the intricate veins that lay beneath the surface of his hand. Anything to steer clear of his gaze, yet I sensed his gaze upon me. "You continue to act as if this isn't real," he murmured, his voice just a breath above silence. I took a deep breath, my grip firm on the rough edge of the box. "For that reason, it must not be. Yet it truly is." I sensed him drawing nearer, the warmth of his presence enveloping me from behind. His hand lingered near my waist, not making contact, yet close enough that I could sense the weight of its presence drawing me in. "I can't stop thinking about you," he murmured, his voice weaving a tapestry of emotion, each word slow and deliberate. "I'm certain you share those feelings too." I pivoted suddenly, the box almost tumbling from my grasp, but he caught it. Holding it firmly between us, our fingers brushing against each other, the gaze he held was unwavering and calm. Yet underneath it all lay a deep yearning, guided, anticipating. I felt the urge to speak up, to refute it, to draw a clear boundary before the distance between us faded away completely, yet my lips remained still, my body anchored by the heaviness of my own treachery. From afar, my husband's voice drifted softly through the open upstairs window, echoing the essence of who I was meant to be, the life I was meant to safeguard. I took a step back, shattering the stillness, creating space between us once more. "This cannot occur," I declared, each word escaping my lips with the heaviness of a burden too great to bear. "It simply cannot." He remained silent, keeping his distance. Yet his gaze never wavered. "Share with me that you don't desire it," he said. I parted my lips, then sealed them once more. The words eluded me. The atmosphere crackled with an intensity that seemed ready to burst at any moment, yet rather than pressing on, he offered me a subtle, nearly unnoticeable nod before redirecting his attention to the stack of boxes. I remained motionless, my heart racing with a volume that felt as if it could be heard by him. As the afternoon unfolded, we found ourselves enveloped in a quiet stillness, each lost in our own thoughts. Yet the silence held a depth of meaning. It was filled, burdened with all the words left unspoken. That evening, while I was brushing my hair in preparation for sleep, my husband approached me from behind, gently kissed the top of my shoulder, and expressed his gratitude for all the progress we were making together in our home. His hand wrapped around my waist, a gesture I knew all too well, comforting and expected. The caress of someone who thought he still understood my essence. I allowed him to embrace me. As the evening drew to a close, I allowed him to lean in and press his lips gently against mine, bidding me goodnight. Yet my body seemed foreign to me. My mind had already wandered to another place. The days that followed unfolded with an unusual weight, as though the very atmosphere pushed back against each stride I made. I sought refuge in the familiarity of daily tasks, cooking meals, responding to messages, and meticulously folding laundry into tidy stacks that appeared to matter only to me. Yet even the softest folds of linen could not soothe the persistent pain that lingered in my heart. My husband stayed true to his character, reflective, attentive, consistently inquiring about my experiences and always trusting the responses I shared with him, responses that felt as bland and lifeless as parchment on my tongue. The shed lingered at the garden's edge, a silent observer cradling within its four walls the haunting remnants of unspoken tales. I steered clear of it as much as possible. Steered clear of him, or perhaps made an attempt? Yet, Turning away is a tactic of the timid when longing has already begun to grow. It was the next weekend when another fracture emerged, slender and perilous, deepening the fissure that already lay beneath the foundation of our home. With a bright smile, my husband shared the news that he would be away for 2 nights, a brief journey for work. Just a simple tale, there's nothing out of the ordinary. He pressed his lips gently to my forehead, urged me not to wear myself out with chores, and vowed to reach out before the night fell. I found myself in that moment acknowledging with a nod, offering a smile, and embracing the role I was meant to play. As the door clicked shut, an enveloping hush wrapped around him, thick and palpable. I promised myself I would keep my days filled with activity. I promised myself that this time alone would be an opportunity to refresh, to cleanse my thoughts, and to rediscover the equilibrium that had so perilously eluded me. I whispered to myself the words a devoted partner ought to express when the silence in the home becomes overwhelming. Yet, as time slipped away, the stillness became increasingly deafening. As the evening settled in, I found myself nestled on the living room sofa, a book resting on my lap, its pages untouched. The television murmured gently in the background, yet I couldn't have named the show that flickered on the screen. My mind, a mischievous wanderer, ventured into realms I had deemed off-limits. As twilight settled in, a gentle knock echoed from the back door. The familiarity was unmistakable, and I could sense their presence without even glancing over. I reminded myself to remain silent, to stay put and allow it to fade away. Yet my body acted before my thoughts could protest. I made my way through the kitchen, fingers gripping the handle, my heart racing so fiercely that I feared he could hear it from the other side of the door. As I opened the door, there he was, one hand casually tucked into his jacket pocket, while the other clutched a small brown paper bag. "I had a feeling you could use a bite," he remarked, raising the bag just a bit. I chose to remain silent. The door should have been closed. I ought to have let him go. However, I chose not to. I took a step back, granting unspoken consent, and he moved into the kitchen as if it were a place he had always been meant to inhabit. With a calm and practiced hand, he opened the bag, revealing 2 containers of takeout from the little Italian spot on the corner, the very one my husband often deemed too indulgent for dinner. He suggested with a playful tone that you might enjoy a break from the usual salad and steamed fish. I attempted to voice my dissent, driven more by a sense of duty than by true beliefs. Yet the aroma of freshly baked bread and rich tomato sauce enveloped the kitchen, and it dawned on me just how little I had consumed throughout the day. We sat at the counter side by side, engaging in a conversation that began with lightness, touching on safe topics and skimming the surface of deeper thoughts. Yet it was not meant to linger for too long. After a moment, he spoke his fork, nudging the final piece of pasta around the plate. "I've been trying to keep my distance. I figured that perhaps by stepping back, it might just fade into the background." I placed my glass of wine on the table, the stem quivering slightly in my grip. Yet he continued, "It remains unchanged." A wave of tension coursed through me and I could feel my throat constricting. "This isn't the place for you." His eyes remained unwavering. "Then ask me to go." I parted my lips, then sealed them once more. The space seemed to shrink around me, the atmosphere heavy and suffocating. My skin tingled beneath my blouse, every nerve awakened, every instinct battling within. He extended his hand toward mine, gently grazing my knuckles as they lay on the countertop. The caress was gentle, yet the warmth of it ignited a fire within me. "I can't help but crave you," he murmured, his voice barely rising above a whisper. "I'm aware that I ought to, yet I find myself unable to." My breath hung in the balance, caught in a web of frustration and desire. In that moment, all I could think about was unleashing my frustration at him. I felt the urge to take off and let my feet carry me away. Yet I remained still. In that moment, my fingers moved with intention, gently sinking into the warmth of his hand, as if my body had already decided long before my thoughts could follow. The distance that once separated us vanished before I even noticed I had drawn closer. He kissed me again, slow and reflective, aware of our complicated feelings, yet yearning for it all the same. I felt a newfound certainty within me. There will be no demonstrations. It was a perilous, hushed yielding to all that I had fought against for so long. His hands found their way to my waist, drawing me nearer, and I could feel the firm outline of his body pressed against me. I remained right there. I had no desire to. As we finally separated, the world around me began to swirl gently. I clutched the edge of the counter, trying to find my balance as my heart raced, pounding so fiercely I feared it might burst from my chest. His breath brushed against my cheek, and the gentle pressure of his hand lingered on my hip. Silence enveloped us. All words had faded into silence. It was clear to us that the boundary had been breached once more. Not by chance, not by frailty, but by decision. And the most unsettling aspect was the sense of inevitability it carried. That night was one of restless tossing and turning. The fabric brushed my skin in an unsettling way. It felt burdensome, stifling, as if the weight of my actions was palpable in the air. The expanse above our bed loomed vast and empty, providing neither solace nor reprieve. The space beside me on the bed lay undisturbed, a silent testament to absence. Pillows arranged perfectly in the spot where his head ought to have rested. The silence enveloped the room, a stark contrast to the gentle cadence of his breath that once filled the space. There was a time when that sound brought me tranquility, a comforting reminder of someone constant and dependable. Yet in this moment, the void weighed more heavily than any presence could have. I remained motionless for hours, reliving the evening repeatedly. Every recollection sharp and unmistakable. The warmth radiating from his hands, the pressure of his lips meeting mine, the instinctive response of my body before my mind had a chance to catch up. I convinced myself that the weight of guilt ought to be more substantial than what I'm experiencing now. I anticipated the overwhelming tide of remorse, the backlash, the embarrassment that was meant to ensue, yet it never arrived. It took an unexpected turn. What arrived in its place was an emptiness that gnawed at the soul, the insatiable, greedy desire for excess. As dawn broke, I could feel my body aching under the burden of the secrets I carried within. As the day unfolded, I drifted through it like a spectre brewing coffee, tending to the neighbour's cat that often meandered into our garden and nurturing the plants on the windowsill that stubbornly refused to flourish despite my devoted attention. The sensation of my breath shifted, and I noticed the slight tremor in my hands as they brushed against the cool porcelain of the coffee cup. Every simple action now resonated with the echoes of his presence. When my husband called from his hotel, his voice was bright and warm, carrying the comfort of someone who has always felt secure. He inquired about the home, my intentions for the day, and if I had found a moment to unwind, I responded to every inquiry with a steady demeanor, as if I were a person unburdened by secrets. I pondered whether he could detect the falsehood woven into my tone, yet deep down I was certain he couldn't. He placed his faith in me completely, that had always been the tale of woe. The second night spent in solitude was even more challenging. The house seemed to have ears, as if it were absorbing every whispered secret and unspoken thought that lingered in the air. In the quiet of the night, the floorboards let out a soft creak while the refrigerator hums gently in the background. Somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of a neighbour's television drifts through the thin evening air. Everything felt more intense, more vivid, as if the universe was straining to witness my falter. I steered clear of the kitchen, the very spot where we had been so near, where his hands had effortlessly discovered my presence. Yet every corner echoed with the shadows of the past, leaving no space untouched by the heaviness of those events. The garden beyond the window, the corridor, the area at the base of the staircase, every corner whispered of his presence now. I promised myself I wouldn't respond if he showed up once more. I made a promise to myself that I would set a boundary at last with conviction. Yet beneath the surface, I understood that it was unlikely. The weight of reality pressed heavily upon my heart, inarguable. As the gentle knock echoed softly against the back door just after sundown, I found myself standing by the window, anticipation coursing through me. I lingered, my hand suspended above the doorknob, caught in a moment that stretched on longer than it ought to have. Yet the door swung open regardless. He entered silently, his face a mask of mystery, the serene composure in his gaze contrasting sharply with the palpable tension that seemed to emanate from him. At first he remained silent. I didn't either. The air around us crackled with tension, a palpable silence that hung heavy as if it were holding its breath, waiting for one of us to voice the unspoken truth that lingered just beneath the surface. "It feels like I don't belong in this moment." He spoke softly, his voice low and almost tender. I acknowledged that truth with a nod. He never belonged in this place. However, I never requested for him to go. "You ought to encourage me to leave." He shared I was unable to do that. The words danced just out of reach, my throat unwilling to give them form. My body remained motionless, yet my chest throbbed as if it could burst under the immense pressure of desire. His gaze roamed over my features, lingering, offering me the opportunity to put an end to this. A final chance to embrace the more secure journey ahead. I didn't take it. Instead, I allowed the space between us to shrink, moving closer, before hesitation could take hold, before anxiety could construct its barrier once more. The kiss, this time, arrived with a sense of certainty. No gentle exploration of limits, no gradual development. It was a yearning, a longing, the tumult of desire that had simmered beneath the surface for far too long, his hands wrapped around my hips, drawing me nearer, and I responded instinctively, without hesitation, without limits. He stood close, the emotion between us, almost his lips, urging for something I knew I shouldn't surrender. My fingers grazed the edge of his jacket, grasping it as if it could anchor the tremors within me. As we separated, gasping for air, our foreheads still touching, I sensed the quiver in my legs. I clutched the edge of the counter behind me, grasping it tightly, as if it were my only lifeline in a turbulent sea. "I can't stop," he murmured into the silence that hung between us. "Even if you asked me to." I shut my eyes. I should have urged him to halt, should have conveyed that this couldn't progress any further, but my hands remained firmly clasped. We lingered in that moment, caught in a delicate balance where the distinctions between right and wrong blurred, fading away quicker than we could ever hope to redefine them. As he finally withdrew his hand, remained at my waist, fingers gently tracing the curve of my side as if committing my form to memory. "I'll slip away before he returns," he murmured, his voice softer now. Yet the journey continues. I chose to remain silent. I was unable to do that, deep down, hidden beneath the layers of fear and guilt. I recognized the truth in his words. The morning my husband returned, the house resumed its familiar cadence, as if the very foundations had not felt the tremors of change. He pressed his lips to mine at the door, a gesture filled with warmth and a sense of belonging. The familiar kiss he had shared with me for years, soft and soothing, refined. A gentle caress that sought no demands and anticipated even fewer. I allowed him to embrace me, offered a smile that felt expected, and assisted in bringing his suitcase up the stairs, my hands unwavering even as my thoughts raced. The remnants of the previous night had vanished, leaving no sign behind. There is no aroma to speak of. There was nothing to indicate a presence, just the whisper of his son's touch lingering on my skin. The recollection of those lips lingered, leaving an imprint on my heart that I was reluctant to acknowledge. I believed I could maintain a divide between these realms. How I wished I could neatly package the wrongness within me and secure it with a lid, yet the box refused to remain shut. The lid continued to shake and clatter. I glided through the day as if I were performing in a beautifully scripted play. Once more, the table was arranged for 3 plates set in a harmonious display. Silverware stood in perfect formation, poised and ready for the next command. My husband shared his experiences from the trip, recounting the uneventful meetings held in the serene hotel. As I listened, I interjected with thoughtful questions at just the right moments, offering smiles when appropriate. I was flawless. Nearly, as the evening unfolded, I couldn't shake the sensation of his gaze lingering on me. Not my husband's, but his son's, seated just across the table, engaged in a delicate dance of restraint. Yet I could sense the intensity of his stare in the uncharted territories where eyes were meant to wander elsewhere. It lacked audacity, not daring. His movements flowed effortlessly, embodying a sense of ease and comfort, fitting seamlessly into the moment. Yet hidden beneath the surface was a subtle persistence, the profound understanding of the bond we had forged. Every glance exchanged between us crackled with the unspoken thrill of what lingered just beneath the surface. Later that night, once the dishes were put away and my husband had slipped off to tend to work calls, I lingered in the kitchen, wiping down counters that didn't really need. It lost in my thoughts. His presence was palpable, a whisper in the air that reached me before any sound did. The gentle sound of footsteps drew near, pausing just before crossing the threshold. Silence enveloped us. I turned away from him. The cloth gripped my fingers with a fierce intensity, yet my breath gave me away, superficial, swift. It felt as if my body had ventured into a realm that my mind was still reluctant to accept. His voice, deep and deliberate, pierced through the stillness. Does he truly perceive your essence? With my eyes shut tight, I exhaled gently, urging my hands to find their calm. Yet the inquiry nestled deep within me, throbbing insistently, uncomfortably close to the reality I sought to uncover. I chose not to turn. I chose to remain silent. I do, he murmured, his voice softer now. The words lingered in the air, weighty and unyielding. The gentle fading of his footsteps echoed in the silence. And though he had departed, the essence of his words lingered in the air. It trailed behind me as I ascended the stairs, entering the bedroom where my husband toiled late into the night. His voice remained calm and professional on the phone, and his eyes would occasionally glance my way, filled with that familiar, courteous warmth. Was oblivious to the subtle quiver in my hands as I carefully folded my nightclothes. He remained oblivious to the warmth that lingered on my skin, a remnant of unspoken words that never passed his lips. The following morning dawned with a brilliant light, excessively radiant. The sky outside gleamed fresh and bright, a canvas washed anew by the night's gentle rain. My husband proposed that we gather for a dinner later this week, something intimate, inviting just a handful of friends and neighbours to mark the occasion of his son's return in a fitting way. With a spark in his eyes and a broad grin, he eagerly began to conjure up ideas, mentally crafting his plans. I nodded, embraced the moment, and stepped into my role with ease, yet the scheme sent a chilling shiver down my back. It brought about deeper connections, heightened awareness, and an element of uncertainty. And yet beneath the fear, I sensed the quick surge of anticipation rising once more, the intoxicating rush of desiring what I shouldn't, the exhilarating thrill of standing at the edge of the cliff, aware that the drop was waiting. The day of the dinner arrived in the blink of an eye. The home resonated with joy, the gentle sound of toasting glasses and the gleaming surfaces of plates reflecting a sense of order and warmth. My dress was selected with intentions subtle yet refined, the neckline dipping just enough to catch the eye, the fabric gracefully hugging my hips in a manner I was certain would draw his attention. And he shared his tale. As the evening unfolded, I noticed the subtle spark in his eyes, the slight, nearly unnoticeable angle of his head as he traced the curve of my bare shoulders with his gaze. Silence enveloped us, yet the energy flowed between us, resonating more profoundly than the gentle melodies drifting through the air. In a moment when my husband was engrossed in a chat with a neighbour about trivial matters, I sensed a fleeting touch of fingers against my lower back as someone moved past me. Unbeknownst to anyone else, the contact was so brief, it might have been mistaken for mere happenstance. Yet deep down, we both understood that it truly wasn't the case. The sensation ignited my skin and my breath hitched once more in that well-known shameful space between desire and remorse. As the evening wound down and the last of the guests drifted away, coats were collected and farewells were shared at the door, I lingered in the hallway, my hands clasped tightly behind my back to stifle their tremors. His gaze locked onto mine one final time from across the room, a moment that lingered just a heartbeat longer than it ought to have, a quiet whisper of memories. This was just the beginning, and I found myself hoping it would never end. The week that followed draped itself over the house, much like a gentle layer of dust, soft and weighty, enveloping all it encountered. Though the exterior remained unchanged, an unseen force stirred beneath, intensifying the burden we bore and stretching the atmosphere around us. My husband navigated his days with the same unwavering consistency, a reliable presence never wavering from the familiar patterns we had woven into our lives. There was a certain warmth in the familiarity of him, and yet that very familiarity had become the backdrop where my treachery unfolded unseen. I navigated around the younger man as skillfully as I could, or maybe I was merely putting on an act to steer clear of him. In that moment, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was always nearby, lurking in the shadows of the house, and I was acutely conscious of the places where our journeys might intertwine. My body sensed his presence long before my eyes could acknowledge it. A change in the atmosphere, a silhouette emerging unexpectedly in the stillness. It felt like my entire being had been attuned to him. Yet the dynamics between us were starting to evolve. Gone are the days of quiet, lingering shadows that bide their time in the background. Now, it stirred full of energy, probing the limits of our control, challenging one of us to shatter the delicate boundary of restraint we still endeavored to uphold. It was a seemingly insignificant moment that marked the turning point, as is often the case. A jacket long abandoned on the back porch bore the marks of a recent rainstorm. The sleeves were damp and the fabric felt cool against my fingers as I lifted it from the railing. I brought it in, caught in a moment of indecision about whether to set it down in the hallway or take it up to the next floor. My hand lingered above the banister, the choice seemingly too insignificant to warrant such deliberation. Yet there he was, at the pinnacle of the staircase, leaning effortlessly against the frame. His gaze locked onto mine with that familiar intensity, as if he were curious to see how long I could maintain the facade that this moment wasn't unfolding. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice gentle and soothing, the words weaving through the stillness that enveloped us. I nodded, placing the jacket on the banister rather than taking it upstairs. I began to leave, yet he was already in motion, descending the stairs, with each step calculated and intentional. He halted right before me, the space between us charged with an intensity that felt anything but casual. He noted without question that you now hesitate to be alone with me. I attempted to move past him, but he effortlessly obstructed the tight corridor, resting one hand against the wall. Next to me, his form positioned in a way that allowed me to sense the warmth emanating from him. "I ought to be," I replied, my voice softer than I intended. "However, that's not the case," he responded. His words nudged at the reality I was reluctant to confront. With my back pressed against the wall, the cool, smooth paint offered a sense of grounding as I focused on calming my breath. His gaze remained fixed on me, holding a steady and unyielding patience that felt almost tangible. "Your desire matches mine perfectly." I might have chosen to reject it. There were countless paths I could have taken, choices to make, moments to shift away, yet I refrained, for the truth was undeniable, and the reality had transformed into something more difficult to accept than the falsehood. In that fleeting instant, we were both frozen in place. The distance separating us felt as fragile as a whisper, the strain tugging at my determination like delicate strands coming undone one after another. The warmth radiated from him, igniting that familiar longing deep within me, a sensation that always surfaced when he was near. He inched closer, deliberately allowing me the chance to look away. It's time to share a different perspective with him, yet I chose not to. The kiss struck with intensity this time, the subtle pain of holding back transformed into something more primal, more desperate. His hands wrapped around my waist, fingers digging into the fabric of my dress as if he could draw me nearer through it. My hands instinctively found their way to his shoulders, gripping more firmly than intended, clinging on as if I were afraid to release my hold. The heaviness of his presence beside me, the heat of his lips, the quiet breath that slipped from my lips before I could hold it back. The hallway brimmed with an overwhelming presence, a sound too profound to be labeled as silence. As he drew away, his breath came in quick bursts, his forehead gently touching mine. We can't keep doing this," I murmured yet. My fingers clung to the fabric of his shirt, knuckles pale and tense. "I understand," he replied, yet the words felt empty in the space we shared. We remained there, suspended in time, both of us, reluctant to break the spell until the familiar sound of my husband's voice drifted up from the living room below, calling out for me. I jumped back as though I had been singed. My hands slipped from his shoulders and I spun around too fast, my head bowing as if I could conceal the warmth creeping across my cheeks. The young man lingered behind, not moving forward. He lingered in his spot, positioned midway on the staircase, observing me as I made my way out. I gathered my thoughts as I prepared to enter the living room, responding to my husband's inquiry about dinner plans with a voice more composed than my trembling hands. With a gentle smile, He pressed a soft kiss to my cheek before turning back to his newspaper, lost in his own world. I lingered for a moment, observing him as the sharp twist of guilt coiled tighter in my chest. Yet hidden beneath the weight of remorse, the yearning persisted. It's even more difficult now as I've experienced once more what I convinced myself I didn't desire. And I realized that neither of us was going to hold back. I convinced myself that I was in charge, that whatever had transpired between us might still be reversed if only I kept my distance for a while. If only I had paused and allowed the flames to wither away in silence. Yet longing has always been a force that refuses to fade into silence. It lingers in anticipation. It explores your rhythms. It understands the vulnerabilities that lie beneath your defenses. As autumn began to weave its way through the corners of the house, the air grew crisp and chilly. Mornings unfolded with that unmistakable chill of air weaving through the gaps in the window. The scent of moist foliage wafted through the air, a whisper of nature's secrets carried by the breeze. The chill could have been the reason for the electric sensation dancing across my skin beneath my clothes. The subtle tremor in my hands as I reached for the kettle told a tale of anticipation. Yet I was aware of the truth. The quiver within me was unrelated to the elements outside. My husband continued with his daily rituals, enveloped in the unwavering confidence that arises from a life where the barriers you've constructed remain unchallenged. Each night he would lean down and place a soft kiss on my forehead, a familiar gesture that held a delicate mix of affection and sorrow, creating a nightly ritual that lingered in the air like a bittersweet memory. It was astonishing to embrace someone with such warmth, yet remain oblivious to the distance that had quietly grown between us. On a Thursday, he brought up the notion of escaping for the weekend. "Just the two of us," he said, a warm smile playing on his lips as he lifted his coffee cup. A brief journey to the seaside, a hotel that feels like home. A scene that feels like home. The sort of place we visited in our younger days when we held on to the hope that those small acts could mend the unspoken words between us. He shared tales of serene dinners, of strolling along the shore, of moments spent in solitude together. And I listened with a smile. I had rehearsed too perfectly. I nodded in agreement, naturally. There was every reason to embrace the opportunity. The setup was straightforward. 2 nights, a bag filled with the cozy sweaters he adored seeing me in, the relaxed jeans that transformed my essence from a woman into a partner. I arranged the garments with care, my fingers precise, yet an emptiness lingered within me. As dawn broke, he set off to wrap up some tasks at work while I remained at home, readying myself for what lay ahead. I lingered by the window, observing as his car rolled out of the driveway, the taillights fading into the distance. In the stillness that enveloped me, I sensed the heavy burden of my own treachery sinking further into my very being. My plan was to embrace solitude for the morning. I convinced myself that I required some distance to sort through my thoughts, to recall the essence of my being before the lines of my existence began to fade. Yet just before the clock struck noon, a gentle knock echoed from the back door. I hesitated before responding to it. I lingered in the hallway, my gaze fixed on the handle from a distance, fully aware of the presence waiting just beyond the door. The moments lingered endlessly. The knock arrived once more, softer this time, waiting with a sense of calm anticipation. As I turned the knob and stepped inside, our gazes locked in an unspoken connection. This time there was no smile, no effortless allure, only the relentless, perilous tug of all that we endeavored to conceal and ultimately could not. He leaned in, his voice low and serious. "We need to talk." I took a step back, allowing him to enter. The subsequent words were softer than I had anticipated. "There are no harsh words or blame to be found here. Here lies the unfiltered essence of 2 souls who could no longer maintain the facade of innocence, yearning to revisit the boundary they had once dared to breach." "I can't remain in this place and observe your facade," he expressed. "I can't remain at the same table hearing the 2 of you share tales of dinner parties and weekend adventures and pretend that I don't desire you." I remained quiet, pondering what words could possibly escape my lips. The unspoken words lingered in the air, while the rhythm of my heart echoed in the silence, a testament to the stories left untold. "I don't want to cause him pain," he continued, his voice gentler now. "Yet being close to you while pretending this is insignificant feels impossible. I grasped the back of the chair closest to me, holding on tightly to quell the tremors in my hands. This was never meant to unfold. I persevered, my voice barely a whisper. Yet it truly did, he replied. We can continue to act as if it never happened, but I doubt either of us can truly sustain that facade. The atmosphere surrounding us was laden, almost suffocating. The kitchen, once a familiar space where I navigated the gentle patterns of a life I had crafted, now seemed to close in around me, stifling and constricted. As I gazed upon him, truly observed him, in his expression I recognized the same dread that gripped my own heart. The haunting desire for something that seems destined for disaster. I felt a strong urge to despise him for that, yearned to hold him accountable for the way he had unraveled my very essence, for the way he had helped me rediscover who I was after so many years of being lost. Yet the reality was more straightforward, more ruthless. I had welcomed him inside. I had longed for his presence. I'm unsure about who took the initial step. Perhaps it was a shared experience between us. The attraction between us became impossible to ignore any further. His hands gently caressed my face. Let me share a little about my waist. Let me share a tale about my back. Drawing me close with an urgency that seemed to reveal more than mere attraction. Our lips connected in a moment of shared intimacy. And this time there was only starkness. Without a doubt, just a deep yearning. The weight of his presence enveloped me, a tangible connection that stirred something deep within. His hands held me tightly as if he feared I would disappear the moment he released his hold. My hands acted on their own accord, woven into the threads of his shirt, clinging tightly as if it were the sole anchor in my world when we ultimately separated. In a state of wonder, the flavor of him lingers on my lips. The warmth surged within me, igniting a fire in my core. The all-too-familiar wave of remorse crashing in, arriving too late to undo the past actions. We can't continue down this path. I softly spoke once more. The same empty phrases I had uttered previously. I understand, he shared his response, yet his hands remained firmly at my waist. We remained in that moment, trapped within the remnants of what we had built side by side, understanding that the journey ahead was fraught with challenges and retreating was not an option. Understanding that neither of us was ready to make that initial move away. The wind danced through the leaves, whispering secrets along the garden path. Life unfolds in its own rhythm. Unaware of the silent turmoil brewing within these confines, and deep down beneath the burden of all that I ought to have experienced, I sensed that this was not the conclusion. It was merely the setting where we ceased our facades.